and I think quite eloquently made the point that they serve to deter people from seeking treatment at an early stage, possibly rendering themselves far sicker when they go to A&E. Will you be in a position to lead a campaign to get the trust in this borough to scrap these pre-assessment forms, which obviously add to bureaucracy and, say, do form part of the hostile environment? And just one very quick point, thank you for mentioning the argument about migration driving down wages and how it is a false one. In fact, it is the case that the weakening of trade union organisation, the restrictions that are so draconian on trade union activity in this country have been key factors in the fall in real wages, along with the specific austerity policies of a freeze on public sector pay or real pay cuts, which we've witnessed over the past decade.
Okay, I'll allow one more question because otherwise somebody has to put their hand up, but then that's it. Okay, yeah. If that's you.
Hi there, I'm Benjamin. I'm from a group called North East London Migrant Action, where I'm campaigning in solidarity. I just wondered whether Diane was aware that hundreds of school children in Hackney can't access preschool meals because of their or their parents' immigration status. And I'd like to ask whether she'd be willing to support our campaign to ask the government to change the law so that nobody is denied a decent lunch at school because of where their parents come from.
Okay, thanks very much. That's quite a lot to...
Well, I did say I was going to race through, and I've dealt with some of these issues in more detail. But let me start by talking about the NHS and charges for healthcare, and also these pre-assessment forms in bars. This business of creating a hostile environment for people who the authorities think are migrants or they think might be illegal in healthcare is both wrong in principle and wrong in practice. Because what happens, you know, people can have communicable diseases like TB, they can have all sorts of healthcare needs, and if they don't get the treatment they need, then it's an issue for the community as a whole. So yes, of course, people shouldn't be charged for healthcare, and of course, I mean, the pre-assessment forms are just a form of deterrence. I'm happy to have any people will get in contact with me. Again, the thing about school children not getting meals, that it's all part, you know, years ago, before I became an MP, one of the jobs I did when I came down from university, I worked in the Home Office. And I didn't actually work in the Immigration Department, I worked in the Home Office as a graduate trainee. And one of the phrases that the Home Office liked to use then was what they called pressure to immigrate countries. And pressure to immigrate countries were black countries. That's what they were. And even then, they were setting up a system designed to deter, designed to be punitive, designed to discourage those persons. And the thing about school meals and the thing about health is particularly wicked, really. Because what is the point? I mean, there was a particular case of a man who had cancer and he couldn't get his chemotherapy because he couldn't produce his paperwork. And remember, these were people who had lived here all their adult lives. And unlike some of us, they didn't have a lot of, you know, why would they need paperwork to prove they were entitled to be here? They thought they were entitled to be here. So yes, of course, on the health panel and on the school meals issue, very happy to get involved in that. But finally on this pull factor and push factor thing, I'm sorry, because I was racing through, I didn't really explain what I meant. What I meant was that in the 80s and 90s, under a Labour government at some points, politicians became obsessed with pull factors. I think that was a phony analysis, and what they were ignoring were the push factors. Now, some of the push factors are absolute poverty. Some of the push factors, increasingly in recent years, are environmental conditions and the environment, and drought zone is forcing people away from their homes. But of course, one of the biggest push factors is, I'm afraid, British American foreign policy. And in, you know, years ago, when I was marching and campaigning on this, I used to say, we are here because you were there. And when you look at patterns of migration, they have a lot to do with British and Western intervention in former colonies or even countries which weren't colonies at all. And I'm sorry I didn't say that, but I was looking at my chair and I didn't want to take up too much time. So finally, I mean, there is a lot to say, because the hostile environment does go back beyond 2012 and 2014, sadly, and it will take some unpicking. But immigration has always been a subject very close to my heart, partly because I'm a child of immigrants, but it was the subject of my maiden speech in Parliament 31 years ago. And I feel so privileged to be part of the process where we can actually change the rate of migration and hopefully change the law and have a system which reflects the best of the British people. And so if those of you who are involved in particular local campaigns, if you want to contact me, if you want me to lend my name or come to events, very happy to do so. Thank you.
There will be an opportunity for more people to join in at the end, but I know that I can't stay very long. So next we're going to move to what's happening in Hackney, and our Mayor Phil Glanville is here to tell you about what we're trying to do within the constraints of trying to do something with it under the current government.
Thanks, Angela. And I'd just like to pay tribute to those that organised tonight's event. It didn't happen by accident. It's actually been many, many months in the making, and Rosemary and Nkafu and Angela from different branches of the Hackney Labour Party that put on tonight, I think deserve our thanks. And I think the fact the room is basically full shows how important this debate. For me, to be on a panel like this with practitioners and activists that have been very much part of Hackney's history of welcoming migrants and campaigning is a daunting one. It's an intimidating panel, and we're only halfway through, and Patrick and Daff still to come. But in my previous life before becoming Mayor of Hackney, did two things that gave me a little bit of an insight into, I think, how we got here. One of them was working for David Lammy MP in his casework team. So I did 5 years of every other Friday sitting with him and his team in Tottenham Town Hall between 2015 and 2010, seeing immigration casework. And I think, people have talked already, this hostile environment did have its origins under a Labour government. A lot of things were better. There were better amnesties. There was work to fund communities like Hackney that were responding to the challenges of migration. Public sector services were being funded, and we didn't have the impact of austerity. But if you look at the NAS system that Diane talked about in terms of food vouchers, if you talk about dispersal, all of those things were things that we were dealing with between 2005 and 10. The challenges of reading letters back to people saying they had to go back to their countries of origin, and it didn't matter that they had health conditions where there wasn't health care in those countries of origin, be it HIV, TB, mental health. All of those things were happening back then. But I think they've been only deepened under the Tory coalition governments. And the Immigration Act of 2014 is when I kind of re-engaged with this issue, and I was working for a small HIV charity. And Diane mentioned very clearly that people were trying to say to government, from the NHS, from public health, from migrant charities, that all of this hostile environment work will not just have a detrimental effect on reducing those pull factors and reducing those that are already marginalised, it will have an impact on the wider population. It will lead to poor health outcomes for everyone. And there's evidence that the council has been gathering from community organisations in the borough that have been saying people that even have status put off from accessing healthcare because they fear being asked some of those questions, or members of their families might be asked some of those questions. And the really inequitable parts of the Immigration Act also turn family against each other. So you can put your tenancy at risk if you've got somebody that doesn't have status living with you under that Act, never mind the impact around the private rented sector and the so-called right to rent, which is another one of those kind of Orwellian terms the government brought in. So we've had a lot of post-fact and myths created around those pull factors. And there were still people in 2014, Labour politicians, and Kate Curry, I think, can get a boo in this room as much as anyone else. But she wrote an article, I think, for the Daily Express or the Daily Mail, saying that pregnant women were getting in black cabs from Heathrow Airport would go into St Thomas's Hospital in her constituency and saying that they were jumping the queue for maternity care. So that dog whistle politics doesn't just come from the right, it has come from other sources as well, and it goes so unchallenged. There is absolutely no evidence of health tourism at all. And nodding to maternity action, absolutely no evidence for it, whether it be HIV, maternity services or other things. So all of those things, for me, come into how I stand as a politician and Mayor of Hackney, and making sure that be it our private rented team is ready with trading standards to make sure that if people are discriminated against in the private rented sector, that we're there to respond to that. And I made very clear statements there, and I also made very clear statements to our letting agents and landlords locally that we would find that type of environment obviously unacceptable. We face very significant challenges due to austerity, and I'm sure we'll come back to them. Massive pressures on no recourse to public funds and support the council is having to meet because that funding is no longer available centrally. On Windrush, Patrick can speak very much about his campaign, but I think we're at the vanguard as a council, as a Labour Party. Deputy Mayor Bramble is at the back, and other politicians in this room, of standing up for that campaign and recognising our part in Hackney. Because Hackney, no one said it, but Hackney has been built by migrants, whether it's the Windrush generation, the Huguenots before that, or EU migrants now. Our public services wouldn't work. Go to the Homerton. They're mixed nationality teams that serve the most vulnerable in our borough, in social services as well. So firmly on the side of that Windrush generation. But something about the Windrush generation, obviously, in the 70-year anniversary, has captured the public imagination. And I think